Gigi the Gadget Goddess, and today I am revisiting the LG Velvet and the LG V60. I told you I'd be covering these devices and pinning them against one another to see, the price difference. Was it worth it? If you're shopping in the market for these two phones, which one might be better for you? I did a camera test and I wanted to go over some little tiny kind of differences I've seen in the two devices since I started using them about 3 weeks ago. One thing I noticed for sure was the difference in the screens. I don't know how well I'll catch this on camera. Let me unlock these phones. On camera, I can notice the difference in these two just looking at them. This one is much lighter. It's not as detailed, and I would expect that, being that it's a cheaper model device. Now, this whole experience has changed my opinion on mid-rangers as a whole. Granted, I've used mid-rangers in the past, but I've never pinned a mid-ranger against a flagship. The first thing I want to do is I want to reboot both of these phones. I want you to see how fast they boot up, and I want you to pay attention to the displays. All right, and go. So yes, one is a T-Mobile device, one is an AT&T device. Should that make a difference? Not really. And I would expect for the V60 to power up faster. It's got a faster processor. Okay, so the V60's back. And the Velvet's back, okay? I'm gonna do this. Velvet's back. Okay, well, the V60 was back. This is the first time that I have rebooted these phones and I was able to keep my wallpaper on the Velvet. Every time I would reboot this phone, my wallpaper would come back as a thin strip down the middle. Granted, it's a third-party software that I'm getting that wallpaper from because it's a video wallpaper. I really didn't think it should matter because my V60 was just fine with it. It didn't do that for y'all sitting here witnessing me reboot the phone, but I can tell you it's done it. Battery life for these two phones is very different. When I would leave, depending on if I was going to work or if I was going to just run some errands, would depend on if I took the dual screen with me. Dual screen does drain the battery a bit more, but even with dual screen, your V60 would last me longer than a day. Now, I am a 2-phone carrying person. I would hear this one go off and say, hey, I need to be charged, because I'm not one that just sticks it on the charger. So when I would charge these, to make sure that I wasn't being biased, I had an extra charger. I would plug them both in. As of right now, this one's at 88% and this one's at 66%. Most definitely, if you grab a Velvet, you're gonna have to charge it every day. You might have a little more leeway on the V60. I could get more than a day out of the V60. I am proud of LG and how it is innovating. The dual screens, they didn't get away from that. A lot of companies will try something out and say, hey, yeah, I don't know how people feel about this. Let's move on to something else. I do think LG is starting to listen to its consumers when we say, hey, you need to advertise more. People don't know how great your devices are because LG pulls me back at least every other iteration of the V series. Although I did have the V50, so the V50, the V60, and the Velvet is kind of like, hey, these are all jumbled together, and I've owned them all. I've shocked myself with this round of phones. A lot of people do a lot of heavy multitasking with these dual screen cases. I favor one dual screen case over the other for cosmetic reasons, mostly. The Velvet seems to have a few more features, which is kind of shocking. I don't favor this whole reflective thing. It looks very dirty when you get a fingerprint on it or whatnot. Hey, how y'all doing? You don't need the whole thing to be reflective. I like how they did it on the Velvet because you get, I do have some alerts on here. You can see your alerts right there. And for the most part, the rest of the case remains pristine. With the V60, I see seem to get that phone so much more dirty. And the fingerprints just, it's a pet peeve of mine. I will tell you, there are various shortcuts that you can install on your Velvet that would allow you to have it programmed to open the same two apps if you just hit that button for shortcuts. That's not really the case on the V60. It is the older of the two phones, but you would think, hey, an update would solve that, right? I don't know, maybe LG will come around and do that, maybe not. At the end of the day, there's more features on the Velvet dual screen than on the V60's dual screen. The dual screen case itself brings a lot more heft to the Velvet. I told you how light that phone was. And I mean, it's gonna bring heft to the V60 too, but the V60 is just a hefty phone to begin with. There's a lot more weight here than there is here, but this phone got a lot heavier once you add the dual screen to it. So this is me viewing footage from YouTube on both devices. I put the main screen to sleep, and this is the V60, this is the LG Velvet. Now, on this scene that just popped up, you see this is much bluer than this over here. It looks a little more washed out according to the camera. To the human eye, it's not as off as it looks to me on camera. But this is another one of those things that when I upload it, I'll be able to tell the difference. I know a lot of people, well, not a lot of people. I did have one question in my comments that asked which microphone I was using when I recorded it. And of course it was my GoPro. I didn't record any video when I shot this. I shot this just for pictures. I'm not big on using cell phones for video. If I'm not using my GoPro, I will typically use my iPhone. I just don't think that Android does as well with video as Apple does. But again, this was just to give you some example of if you're viewing YouTube, how, you know, they're running the same video at the same time. And I can definitely see there are more colors over here. But of course, that's just due to specs. And that's just something you have to look at if you want to spend that kind of money in a device. Let's listen to some speakers. We'll do full volume first. So this is, which one do we want to do full volume on first? We usually give the V60 the blessing first. So I'll roll with the V60 first. Let's go. So that's 10 seconds over there. Let's roll over here. See if there's a huge difference. So that's 10 seconds on full blast. All right, I'm gonna carry on from half volume on the V60. All right, let's go from half volume. I skipped a little bit over here on the Velvet. I'm not an audiophile, so I'm not going to say, oh my gosh, I'm blown away. I know one was louder than the other. Another thing you might want to take note of if you're an audiophile, because we covered the audiophile stuff, is that although both phones have a headphone jack, see here and here, only the V60 has the quad DAC. So if you into your music and you really like to tweak the settings and be able to hear your music, the quad DAC is in the V60, not the Velvet. So that's something you might want to take into account. Now, some people don't even use headphones anymore. So many smartphones have moved away from giving you a headphone jack. For my hardcore, I still love my headphones. I like to hear my music. I need that quad DAC to make things sound the way they're supposed to sound. Hands down, this is the only phone out of these two that you want. the V60. Processor specs. You know, people like to get into this thing where, oh, processors really matter. I mean, they do if they're optimized correctly. I'm going to do a thing where I just open some apps on both phones and see who opens up fastest. Let's get started. Okay, let me start off by showing you nothing is open on these phones. No recent items, right? So we're going to go back into our music and I'm going to open Amazon Music. 1, 2, 3, press. And Amazon Music opened up fastest on the V60. I'm gonna go, and yes, I listen to a lot of books, so I'm gonna open 1, 2, 3, press. The Velvet wins on that one. Now I'll go to my personal music gallery located in both phones. 1, 2, 3, press. About the same. And SoundHound. 1, 2, 3, press. Okay, slight edge to the V60. All right, everything stayed in memory good. Clear all that out. What is a good intensive app to open? Mobdro. That is very different. Okay, so let's open it up. They open simultaneously. And if we want to watch TV, talking about our latest storm here. Mobdro is a third-party app. You have to go retrieve that yourself. It's not something that I don't think it's in the Play Store. Various channels, as you can see, that you can kind of get. Telemundo, CBS, TNT. So yeah, Lifetime, the whole nine. Investigation ID is one of my joints. So yeah, if you don't have Mobdro, make sure you go scoop that up. It's great for Android. I will never be the person to tell you which one of these phones you need to buy. But a lot of people probably are curious as to if I'm keeping one of these, which one it's going to be. I've kind of made some statements on my own live streams about getting rid of one of these phones. Now, hands down, I wouldn't get rid of the Velvet because it was sent to me from LG. So regardless of how I felt, I'm keeping it because it's the first review device I've ever received. So it's going to hold a special place in my heart for my whole career of YouTube, right? So it's not going anywhere. Even if I was to say, hey, if I had to pick one of these, it would be the V60. Let me sell the Velvet. No, the Velvet's going nowhere. But if it were me and I'm spending money on one of these devices and I had to pick, hands down, I would pick the Velvet. Number one, the Velvet is just a lighter device. Now, I told people I love phones with some heft to them. I do. That wasn't a lie. I still like phones with a bit of heft to them. Shout out to Juan. He's doing his podcast right now. Juan Bagnell, if you haven't checked him out. But when I say I felt like this phone wasn't even glass because it was so light. It is really, truly that light, that thin, and just easier to hold in your hand. When I went to do the actual shootout of the V60 and the Velvet, it was very hard to shoot with the V60, very hefty phone, the Velvet, and carrying around a GoPro. So I didn't take my dog because I felt like it would be a lot. The fact that I can have just about the same device for less, would lean me towards the Velvet as well. I still got my headphone jack. I still have great cameras. And although it's a slower processor, I am still going to be able to do all the duties that I do every day on the mid-range phone. I have a headphone jack, but I don't care about quad DAC. That's me. That might not be you. You might need that quad DAC. You need to be over here. For this processor to run as it does now, does not mean it's going to run this way 6 months from now, a year from now. I won't have this phone 6 months from now or a year from now. If you are someone who keeps phones for long periods of time, you might want to take that into consideration when you're looking at both of these devices, because processor comes into, the discussion. When you're keeping a phone for a long period of time, it starts to slow down, it starts to lag. And to me, a lot of people don't understand that, most phones do lag at some point. The only phones that never really lagged for me were Huawei devices. LGs have held up pretty good for me. But when I say lag, if you're carrying the same phone every day for a year, if it starts to slow down, you're not going to notice because you have nothing else to compare it to. The reason I notice lag is because I carry multiple devices. I start to notice this device is faster than that one, or my iPhone is faster than my Android, to whereas before they were keeping up with one another. Another thing you want to take into consideration: I don't keep phones long. This phone for me was phone number 8 this year. Phone number 8. Last year I owned 10 phones. This year I on the path of owning 10 phones. I'm probably not telling most people things that they don't already know, but I'm hoping I helped somebody out. I know this wasn't your typical review or comparison of 2 phones, but I'm not really your typical YouTuber. When I take these 2 phones and use them in everyday life, I think about what people ask me about phones and what people want to know. They typically don't want to know specs. They typically don't care what processor is in a phone. They want to know, hey, how are the pictures? How's the battery life? What's the screen look like? What different colors does it come in? And that's what I tried to give you here. I didn't tell you it's running Android 10. I didn't tell you those things for a reason, because I'm putting this video out for somebody who's comparing 2 devices based on how they would use them in day-to-day life and what their uses might be. Now, I do know that there are people that are audiophiles, and that's why I included the information about the quad DAC. Some people might not even know that exists or what a quad DAC is. That's a whole nother story for a whole nother time, so I don't make this into a 20 or 30 minute video. I wanted something short, sweet, and to the point. That being said, you got 2 great devices here. You need to pick based on what your needs are, what your wants are, and what your desires are from your phone. Not by spec, because to me, using both of these phones, I saw very little difference in both devices other than appearances and weight. I'm going to wrap this up by saying, hey, thank you LG for the experience, because I purchased the V60. The LG Velvet was sent to me from AT&T. I got various cases from Rinky and Nimbus 9. I got a nice car mount kit from Nimbus 9. All of these opportunities came to me within the same week, and I've been so appreciative, and I've enjoyed reviewing all these devices. That being said, I want everybody to be safe out there. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you on the next one. Holla!